Hello again, everybody. This is Rocketrickj18, and today I want to do something a little different, partially, and that is I want to talk to you about uh, the SGC situation and why, at least in my opinion, which is mostly uninformed in terms of the details, but I don't have any I'm not privy to any inside information, so everything's coming out of my head as far as. So if you don't like what I have to say, you'll have only me to blame for it. Uh, and that's neither here nor there. But um, some of you may know that I started practicing law in 1976, so almost 50 years ago, 49 years ago. and my practice consisted mainly of business with some emphasis on healthcare from a business standpoint, and from a tax standpoint, I did a fair amount of tax work as well. And in the course of my experience, I was involved in some mergers and acquisitions, what lawyers and accountants like to call M&A work. But there is a difference between a merger and an acquisition, and even in a merger, when it has technically the form of a merger, that is to say, where two companies go out of their separate existence and emerge as one single corporation, versus an acquisition in which one company or corporation, by one means or another, acquires another company. And that, in effect, is what happened between PSA and SGC. Both of those corporations are still in existence. The departure of the president, chief executive officer, member of the board of directors of SGC doesn't really have anything to do with the life expectancy of the corporation SGC Inc., if that's what it's called. More likely than not, it's something like that. And of course, PSA remains a separate corporation, as does Collectors Inc. Collectors Inc. is what you might call a holding company. That is to say, its main assets are ownership of the stock of one or more corporations. Now at least two corporations, because they own PSA, they own SGC, and I'm sure probably some others as well. But this was an acquisition. All of the stock of SGC, I imagine, was acquired either through one of any number of possible methodologies, but there may still be some minority stockholders in SGC out there. I don't know whether that's the case or not. But in an acquisition, and in many mergers, it's highly unusual for both chief executive officers to remain with the company. And that's there's a number of sayings in the mergers and acquisitions field, and one of them is that one of the most important things to be decided is who's going to be the chief executive officer of the either the new corporation in case of a merger, or the surviving corporations in a case of an acquisition. And that was settled long before this merger or this acquisition was announced. And clearly that's Nat Turner. And let's see, I forget Mr. Hoge's first name, but Brian, I think it is. They were the survivors. And Peter Steinberg, the SGC President, CEO, was not likely to survive as just an employee of either SGC or whatever. And the way that this was announced, his leaving, I got a couple of things that I want to mention about that. I'm sure that Peter Steinberg, as part of the acquisition, signed an employment contract. And in that employment contract, he made lots of promises, and the company that he was employed by, presumably SGC, certainly made promises to him. Most chief upon was how much his compensation was going to be and what benefits he would get. And, if there was a certain term, oftentimes, if you recall back when the acquisition was announced, it was lots of things were told that ultimately turned out to not be true, or not prove to be true in the long run. And that's not uncommon. That's the rule rather than the exception to the rule. So, not a surprise. Other people have said the same thing, not necessarily from a technical standpoint, but from a practical standpoint, and I think that's really the way it is. And the number of really a merger of equals that ever takes place is, it's extremely rare. It does happen occasionally from time to time, but it's very rare. And the reason for that is that even in a merger of equals, one of the parties is going to be more equal than the other one. It sounds odd to say it that way, but that's the reality. So is it surprising that Mr. Steinberg has left? No. It would have been expected by most people who are familiar with this type of work, and by a lot of you out there who didn't see how it could possibly work very well going forward. The other thing is, I wouldn't put too much stock in what Peter Steinberg said about his departure. It's highly likely that the press release, and the written statement was not written by him, but was written by somebody at Collectors or PSA, probably Collectors. And the reason for that is that I'm sure, again, it would be highly unusual for his employment contract not to include both a non-disclosure agreement and a non-disparagement agreement. And the differences between those two are subtle, and they both have some element of each in them. Technically, a non-disparagement agreement is a contract or a clause in a contract where the employee agrees not to say things that are disparaging of the employer. And very common in situations like this, because one of the key things that was acquired by collectors is the goodwill and reputation in the business world of Collectors Inc. and also of SGC and PSA. So they don't want to have anything out there where either party says negative things about the other. And that's what a non-disparagement agreement precludes. Now, of course, it's a promise, and the promise is backed up by probably some financial penalty for a breach. The non-disclosure agreement has more to do with, let's say, disclosing things like, strategies and information, non-public information of one or more of the companies. So both of those things would have some statement, result in a statement in the contracts that in going forward, that both during his employment and after, that he would not reveal any information that was not public already, unless he was obligated by law to do so. And that's the standard, type of non-disclosure agreement. And these are business secrets, trade secrets, all fit under the heading of that type of agreement. In the non-disparagement agreement, it's going to say something like, the parties to this contract will not make statements disparaging of the other parties. And again, that's backed up with typically with some financial penalty for a breach of that agreement. So those are the things that make it not surprising, A, that Peter Steinberg is no longer employed by SGC and no longer affiliated with Collectors Inc. It is also not surprising that in his statement he said all kinds of nice things, both about Nat Turner, about PSA, and about Collectors, all as expected and indeed probably as required by the terms of his contract. And that's probably why he actually didn't write the statement. Probably somebody in public relations wrote that, and he so that's, again, all that to be expected. So that hopefully that clears things up a little bit and maybe makes it a little clearer to how it all came about. The second thing I want to do now is to talk about baseball cards. And in particular, I want to talk about 10 baseball cards. 3 of them are 1952 Topps cards, and these are all high numbers, and they all come about as a result of pickups that I've had over the last month or so. So they are, and I'm going to turn the camera down, and you can look at baseball cards instead of my ugly mug. So the first one is Davy Williams, card number 316. And Davey was a member in 1952 of the New York Giants, and he remained as such the following year when he was card number 1 in the 1953 Bowman color set. So he was a second baseman, and so that's again, that's Davey Williams. Next, card number 395 is Jake Pittler, and he in 1952 was a Brooklyn Dodger. And here is his 1952 Topps card number 395 out of 407. And Jake Pittler had been around for a while, and he was a coach in 1952 with the Brooklyn Dodgers. So helped coach the Dodgers to the pennant, where they were defeated in, I want to say, 6 games, I think, by the New York Yankees. And here's card number 397, Forest, Maine, with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And so that's Forest, Maine. He was a pitcher. Yeah. So those are my 3 pickups to go along with the 1952 Topps high number series. And I'll just fan them out here so you can see them while I talk. And so I now have a total of 12. That puts me a little bit ahead of where I hoped to be starting on January 1st. And so it's now in July, so that's 7 months. And in August, will be the 8th month. And I, have acquired 12 of these cards, so I'm ahead of the one per month that I set out to do, and hopefully I'll pick up 1 or 2 at the National that are a little bigger cards than the commons that I've gotten so far. So 12 out of 97. 97, right. So the next cards that I'm going to show you are 6 new cards from the 1940 play ball set, which I'm also working on. And the first one is Don Paget. This is card number 109. Paget, this is, by the way, is on the cover, not on the card. He was a catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, and he actually had the highest batting average in the National League in 1939. So Uh, he batted .399 in 92 games. So he probably didn't have enough at bats to qualify for the batting crown, but nevertheless, 399 is an exceptional year for anybody. Next, we have Lon Warneke. Lon Warneke was a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, and in 1939, he finished 13-7. He also played in Cuba, or sometimes Cuba, played for the Cubs, and yeah, and he was a really terrific pitcher. Arguably could have been considered for the, and still might be at some point, for the Hall of Fame. Got a pretty good WAR. I don't remember the exact amount it was, but I mean, there certainly are Hall of Famers with lower WARs than the Lon Warnekes. So it's card number 114. Next is card number 115, and this is a card of a Cuban-born player, nicknamed Mike. His name, of course, is Miguel. And he was a great Cuban player back in the days when he was played in his home country. And he was also a coach for the St. Louis Cardinals in 1939. In 1938, he actually managed the club for a brief time. Some people think that he might have come up with the expression "good field, no hit," which was a very famous moniker applied to catchers in particular. Next is card number 123, and this is Oral Hildebrand, and he was on the 1940 New York Yankees. He pitched 4 innings of scoreless relief in the World Series. He won 10 games and lost only 4. And so that's Hildebrand, card number 123. Next is another really good pitcher. In 1939, 1940, Eldon Ocker was a pitcher for the St. Louis Browns. Any of you who are familiar with the Yankeeography series would know that Eldon Ocker was a contemporary of Babe Ruth, and had some, was called upon to remark on his memories of various and sundry things related to the Bambino. We tell a little bit about his season. So he had up through 1939, his record was 96-62. He had been with the Detroit Tigers, traded to the Boston Red Sox in 1938, and sold to the Browns early in 1939. His best season was in 1935 when he had a record of 18-7 and led the American League in winning percentage. He appeared in 2 games in the 1934 World Series for the Tigers, winning 1 and losing 1. And so that's Eldon Ocker. He's in a bunch of cards, like the 1936 Gaudy premiums, the R314 set. So I know he's in that because I've got one of those cards. And then lastly is card number 183, rather, or 153. I'm sorry, I misread it. Of Bill McKechnie. And if those of you who have been around for a while might know that he lent his name to the Pirates' spring training field in Bradenton, Florida, McKechnie Field. He's shown here as it's a little bit hard to read, but he's shown here as a manager of the Cincinnati Reds in 1939. But he played most of his career for Pittsburgh, and he also coached or managed Pittsburgh during its back-to-back National League, well, not back-to-back, I guess. He managed Pittsburgh in 1925 when they won the World Series, beating Walter Johnson's Washington Senators. And in 1928, he managed the St. Louis Cardinals to a National League championship. And finally, in 1937, he won his St. Louis Cardinals won the National League pennant, although they lost. I think I might have said 1927, 1937. Although they lost the World Series to Joe DiMaggio and Lou Gehrig's Yankees. We'll point out that this card is one of the Superman gum advertising, which are slightly less easy to get than the standard which is shown here on the Eldon Ocker card. And it reads a pictorial news record of America's favorite sport. Save these cards. Know all about the game and its prominent players. New picture of the year, 1940, copyright of Gum Inc., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But sometime later in the year, they started advertising for Superman. So, particularly Superman gum and adventure picture story cards. Those of you who are Superman aficionados know that the first comic book to feature Superman was an Adventure Comics. So it's just a little tidbits there. So anyway, that's what I have to show you today in terms of pickups associated with two sets on. And so this is Rocketrickj18 coming to you from the launching pad and wishing that all your collecting dreams come true.